All right, so the next session is Journey to Contribution, using the testing toolkit as a support. I mentioned the testing toolkit, but I forgot to mention a very important piece. The Moduloop testing toolkit is what we consider as the starting point once you've installed Moduloop. Now, you might not know what it does or how it works. Don't worry, we've got you covered. If you go to learn.moduloop.io, there is a testing toolkit course. So here's your homework. Install Moduloop, deploy Moduloop, either using Azure or Miniloop, whatever, or using the code, whatever works for you. Yeah, whatever works for you. Once you've got it up and running, get the testing toolkit up. Once you have the testing toolkit up, go to learn.moduloop.io, take the testing toolkit course. It will teach you how everything works. And then you can consider yourself Moduloop, semi-Moduloop fluent. You're almost there. So at this point, there's Elijah, Paul, and Sam. Elijah is one of our contributors. He'll talk through his experiences using the testing toolkit and so on. Paul, are you starting? All right, Elijah, Sam, if you guys could join us up front. Right. Simeon says, Paul, Elijah, and Sam come up front. Right, there you go.
Brilliant. Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Baker. I'm engineering manager at Infotex. There. Sound not quite working right. I'm engineering manager at Infotex. And today I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about how you can go on a journey to becoming a Moduloop contributor. So this is open source. That's what we expect. Everyone here has got the potential to being able to contribute to this amazing effort that we've been listening to. And we just want to take you through how you can do that. Now we've got a specialized focus here. And that's on the testing toolkit. So I wanted to actually ask the crowd who's heard of the testing toolkit, but we've spoken about it so often in the pre-sessions, I don't think I need to do that. I'm sure you've all heard about it, but you might not know all the capabilities of it and why we see it as a supportive tool in terms of journey to contribution. And that's what we want to cover in this talk. So there's 3 points that I want to get across that I hope you understand after this talk. The first one is that all of you can be contributors. The second one is all the features and functionalities that this testing toolkit, we're actually going to start calling it the Moduloop toolkit. Because you don't just use it for testing, you can use it for lots of other things. So this Moduloop toolkit, all the different ways in which we can use that, and the powerful concept behind it. And then lastly, we're going to talk about where we think this amazing project might end up, you know, if we get help from the community. So we got a vision for where this can go, and we'd like to share that with you. Okay. So how do we do next slide? I've got Elijah on the side here. I'm going to get you to talk on your slide soon. Do you mind just standing there? Okay, great. Thank you. So let me just introduce a little bit about the Moduloop toolkit, as I'm calling it in this presentation here. We might not have finalized that name yet, but we certainly think that we need to change the name because it's not just testing. So what is the Moduloop toolkit? It is effectively an open API toolkit. And what I mean by that, you guys might not know because not everyone's technical, but open API is a standard for defining interfaces for HTML API calls. And why is that relevant? It's a standard that's been set up that's agnostic of any language, and but is both human readable and machine readable. And it's used really to help explore how products and interfaces work. And that's actually the fundamental purpose of the Modular Loop Toolkit is to really leverage that power and definition that's been sitting inside that API as much as possible to help make your journey as a developer and a contributor as much as possible. So fundamentally, we are supporting this open API standard. So then there's three main activities. I see there 1, 1, 1. So just imagine this 1, 2, 3. But that you can do using this toolkit. So the first one is connecting systems together. So normally we follow this API first approach in our design, where we design these specifications of systems. And if you do that, and you understand the ins and outs of the maybe this new component that you've been building, then we can model in the Open API Toolkit. You can also use it for exploring the products and systems that you're connecting to, simulating them and demonstrating them. In fact, we on the POC side, we often build a POC on top of the testing toolkit that then gives a little demonstration of how the code works, but then actually monitors those API calls and lets you do a deep dive into those API calls. So it's a very sort of detailed view and valuable demonstration of use cases at an API level, which is really what we're talking about here. Okay, then the next part that we use this for is development. So we can develop against an API. And I'm going to get into this in a little bit more detail when I talk about the system integrator journey. But once you've got this open API that's been defined, you can use it to validate your API calls. You can use it to actually generate your mocking data. You can use it to then monitor that data. So there's a mechanism that you can use, and if TTK is in the way, it actually makes this journey of building integrations and interfacing components or building parts to meet the requirements of an API definition really easy. And in a way, okay, I'll leave that to the last point. Validation APIs, that's the other part that we use. So once you built against this testing toolkit, you can then actually start, you can say, okay, great, it works, but what happens when things go wrong? And you can start including tests that really test your product on all the edge cases. And when you do that, you build up these test cases, and then we have a facility so that you can run that locally. You can test it locally. You can upload into your CI environment, that's continuous integration pipelines. And therefore, you can have automated regression tests of the code that's coming in, which is important for open source. And then finally, you can package that up as a Helm test and deploy. And remember, this is the same test that you ran locally to validate that the functionality works the way that you expect after you've deployed it. You've heard in this last couple of days how many different ways that you can deploy Modular Loop. And this is a way of saying, yes, this is a new deployment, new configuration, and the functionality works as it was designed by the developer originally. So these are very powerful concepts which we are using the Open API Toolkit for. Okay, next. Then here's another point, is when you're building products and product design, there's a mixing of different audiences. And this is where we see this happening in the testing toolkit, is you have product owners talking to the product consumers, you know, the people who own the product and the people who are trying to interact with it. Coders and non-coders, developers and quality assurance experts. Really, I guess the point is what I'm making is that sometimes this can't be code, and it needs to be in an environment that is approachable and manageable at sort of that API definition level, which the testing toolkit or the Modular Loop Toolkit is. Okay, then why is it important, Modular Loop? Well, we've using it now to support all 4 of the pillars. So I know maybe it's sitting on the quality product officially, but really we're using it to help get adopters on board. We're using it to build new POCs, which we normally do when we're exploring a new use case. And sometimes that use case involves interacting with other systems, and sometimes there's a missing part in the middle. And if you can define those APIs well and put some program flows together, then you can simulate it using the testing toolkit. So you don't need to get to POC coding. You can just do it in the testing toolkit. And then finally, those functional test harnesses on the, oh, did I miss one? Yeah, the connecting to systems is pretty much the same as the adopting to scale. And then the fact that you can then turn these tests that you use when you're building the system into a sort of automated tests that run in those 3 different levels, developer, CI, and then deployment, is a very powerful concept which we use these for. Okay, so let's talk about a journey of a contributor as a system integrator. So how can a system integrator make a contribution into the Mojaloop scheme? So I've used the stars to indicate where the testing tool or this Mojaloop toolkit is really playing an important role. So initial training and understanding, exploring those APIs is important when you're going to be interacting with it. So you need to go through that exercise. Then a lot of our test harnesses, we've got a test harness with Payment Manager and TTK, and you run that locally, and it's got a working test case. So you use that test case, and then you build your... Okay, is that better? Can everyone hear? Okay, great. So, so once you've got this test harness working with a working test case, you can then build your integration that produces that same API call that triggers off the test case. So if it's different, you can see it in the monitoring. So when you build the integration, you see the requirement immediately, and then you build it and you can check it. Then after that, you need to make it so that it's production ready. And to do that, you need a test set which works on those error cases. So then you sort of add in all these edge case tests, and you build up a test set that really tests that new use case that you're taking live on the component. And once you've got that, you can then configure it to run automatically in your CI pipeline in the middle there. And then lastly, when you deploy it into a sandbox or even a production system, you can then run your Helm tests automatically through the environment to validate that the function's working. Okay. So let's jump to the journey of a hub operator. It's very similar. We have 2 ways in Mojaloop at the moment where you can run Mojaloop in a local environment. We've got the mini loop, which uses a Kubernetes, and then we also got this testing harness, which we use in our scripting in our CI tests inside Mojaloop, which deploys using Docker Compose. And both of those are really developer tools. They're designed so that you can run things and then interact them from a developer. So you can map in drives, put in new files, you can upload test cases. So it's really developer friendly. So you can run it in that environment, and in that environment we do have TTK deployed. You've seen it before. You can run the demo, check that it works. You can give a POC, change the values, do slightly different calls, adjust those test cases, make sure that your POC is in fact running the way that you want. And then if that passes, so if everyone agrees, yes, this is a use case we want to take forward, then you can start to build that use case test set, which really starts to explore it from the fringes. And then that can be then configured to run in the CI pipeline, and then you can use it again for your deployment test. Okay. So you next. So this is the last thing. So we've been working also quite a bit on the journey that people go on when they trying to build a scheme, trying to get to MVP. And there's really lots of different phases. And at all of these phases, you really are introducing new people to APIs, or you're building POCs to test out concepts, or like in developing the business case or deploying to a sandbox, getting people integrated in, they need to build their parts. Building your hub, there's missing components, you need to build those in and you need to test them and start building out those validation test sets, and then the final go live with the validation. So at each one of these phases, what we've been finding is that we've been using this tool. So I just wanted that to be clear, if it isn't already. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Sam, where's Sam? And he's going to introduce Elijah, and Elijah's a contributor, Mojaloop contributor, so we want to talk about his story and his journey.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Elijah. I want to give a shout out to Chris Law and others who were driving this program of supporting Mojaloop contributions, so that we can have a group of contributors come on board and start developing. So along with Elijah here, we actually have 3 or 4 other members, some of who attended our previous event in Zanzibar from Arusha. So we have some students. So our goal is to support them as much as we can so that they can learn about Mojaloop and start contributing soon. So Elijah, for those of you who were there at the previous community event, so he was part of the winning team at the DFS Labs PISP Hackathon, and we also saw the demonstration. And he's driven, he's engaged, and we want to see him become a core team member as well. A core team member meaning who is working on Mojaloop core and a Mojaloop ecosystem. So Elijah can talk more about what helped him and maybe what he came across, the hurdles, and how the community helped him, those kind of things. Thank you, Elijah.
Hi guys. Yeah, like Sam has introduced me, I'm Elijah Okello. I'm from Uganda, studying software engineering in my final year. Yeah, so when I attended my community event, the community event in Zanzibar, of course I fell in love with the Mojaloop community. I like the enthusiasm. I like the fact that there's so many people who, come here to talk about something that is very crucial in the world, money, right? Yeah, so I'm going to talk about how I started out and how I got to contribute to Mojaloop in the end, yeah. So it all began with a hackathon in Uganda. It was organized by High People, and I started to interact with the software. At the time, I think it was Miguel setting up the testing environments, I don't know. Yeah, it must have been Miguel. So from then on, I went to participate in the DFS Lab PISP bootcamp. And that's the time they introduced to us the testing toolkit. So the testing toolkit, we used it to mock, it was really mocking for us a hub, a Mojaloop hub. So you run it using Docker Compose on the local host, and then you hit the API endpoints, and also it gives you a sort of feeling of what a real deployed Mojaloop would feel like when your application is interacting with it. Yeah, and it really helps because it helps you to prove a concept. If it won't work, then it won't work, right? Yeah. So in regards to contribution, I think, first of all, the foundation has done a great job in making sure that the Slack channel is open. Anyone can join. So I think that shows that there is a deliberate effort by the foundation to make sure that people can join in. Yeah, because I think it's not that hard to get into Slack. Besides, Simeon's email is also really public. I got it from a YouTube channel. So you can reach out to him, and if you want to contribute. I remember when I wanted to contribute to VNext, I sent Simeon an email, and Simeon put me in touch with Pedro. Yeah, Pedro is working on VNext. So I think the community is doing a lot. Yeah, so as a contributor, I'm just going to be talking about the points that you're seeing there. So as a contributor, at the time I didn't know so much about software, Mojaloop. I didn't know so much about it. It was something that I had just used from a very technical point. APIs and JSON and all. It's really technical. It's not really fun. But the training program, I think it's at learn.mojaloop.io. It gives you a very high level, what Mojaloop is supposed to be, what is intended, what is the specification for, how it gives you a multi-perspective, in a multifaceted view of what the software should be for both the technical people, the advisors, government people. So it really gave me, so I went through like, I think I've done like 4 courses there. Yeah, I've done like 4 courses during this time the build up to the contribution, right? So I've done like DFSP 101, Moja 101, so I've done quite a number. Yeah, so I have quite a solid understanding of how the software is supposed to be, like, the functional requirements. Yeah, and I think the training program is actually a very good thing. I would only appreciate if it's like made better, like that it looks better. Yeah, so it's really cool. Like it does the job of giving the information, but it should just be made easier to use, right? Yeah, and I think I'll be available to just share some feedback with whoever is concerned. Yeah, so so the next is the testing toolkit. So the testing toolkit helps, like I mentioned before, helps to build proof of concepts. It also just helps you to get a feel of how Mojaloop should work. I think we've seen it a lot here. Where you mock up peer-to-peer payment and see the different API calls that happen during the process. Yeah, it gives quite a solid understanding of how the scheme is supposed to work and everything. So as part of my contribution, I am currently working with Pedro on vNext. Yes, it's been a nice, very interesting journey. I like the fact that everyone who is working in like the software development teams, they're so inclusive. They want to help. They want to get you started as soon as. So from the time I got in touch with Pedro until I made my first pull request and got it merged, I think it's about 1 year. Yeah, so Pedro's been so patient. It's very, very patient. So I reached out to him on email. We had a Zoom meeting, and then after that Zoom meeting, I had very many school commitments, and I ghosted him for like 9 months. I didn't get the opportunity to apologize, Pedro. I'm sorry. So I ghosted him like for 9 months, and I got back. I think I got in touch with Sam in Zanzibar, and then I got back on the Slack, and then I started the conversation again. So I was working with, as part of the students that Sam talked about. So I'm part of the same group, trying to get the knowledge and start contributing to the core software. Yeah, but during that process, I reached out to Pedro, and he just got me to the vNext team. I met the other people, all of them, I met them online. Yeah, and so he had me set up my environment on my local machine, and then during that process, I found a bug in one of the files. It was just something that was poorly commented, so I fixed it. I made a pull request, and he merged it. That felt so good. Yeah, that really felt so good. Contributing into software that is managed by a foundation, the magnitude of Mojaloop is not a small thing for me. I don't know about you, but for me, it's a huge achievement, and I think it's the first of many pull requests that will be merged. Yeah, so that's it from me. I hope to interact with all the teams that are here. But I think what I think needs to be done to make the contribution process simpler is such initiatives like telling people about the fact that it's easy to contribute. I think it should really be explicitly conveyed that please, it's very easy to contribute. I think there's a contributor guide as well somewhere. Yeah, that really helps with people knowing what to do when they want to contribute, and also it's not that hard to contribute. It really looks so complicated. I remember when I saw that, like what Paul presented, that huge diagram. It's intimidating for a new person, but if you talk to him and you ask him to explain, I think he will do a good job in explaining, and you can start contributing. That's it for me. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Elijah. That's Jane.
Did I just offer to write up a contributor guide? Yeah, sure. I'll do that with your guidance.
Wow, that's great. So it's a really important in the community that we have more and more people contributing and people understanding that they can contribute because it isn't impossible. Yeah. So thanks for sharing your story. And the VNext project is really important and close to all of our hearts. So I'm so happy that you were able to contribute to it. Thank you. So there's more. And that is because I think there's a wider application for this toolkit. And that is because Digital Public Goods Alliance is all about mixing systems, getting them to work together. So I feel like there could be a need where maybe a slightly more generalized version of this, or maybe as it is sufficient to be able to help us along this journey. And if more organizations in the Digital Public Goods Alliance adopted the toolkit, then it would be even easier to do. So another point that I would like to make is I believe the Merge Loop toolkit has got good product market fit. And I know this is a claim that I can't really back up, except everyone. So this is how the story goes. It takes a while to get a developer team to start using the Merge Loop toolkit. But once they do start to use it, they don't stop talking about how much they like it. So to me, that's good product market fit. But I wanted to actually measure that. So I put a survey together. And fortunately, I didn't get enough respondents to really come up with some decent results. So please, if you're using the toolkit, I would appreciate some feedback. So if you could follow that link and sort of fill out that form. Because I think it's important, especially if we're thinking about modifying the tool, that we understand why people like it. Because what happens if we break it and then they don't like it anymore? That would be horrible. So I don't think we're going to do that. I think we're going to make it better. But I really do would appreciate your feedback. The feedback that we've got so far does support the claim. So what could a future version of the Merge Loop toolkit look like? So I've been discussing this sort of offline on the side with some of the team members, and I think it is pretty generic as it is, but there are some little tricks that we could do to make it even more generic, and I think that would just enable us to use this tool in much more use cases. So I'll go through some of them quickly. So we have a hub mode. We could generalize the state stores, which would then make this a general solution. We can, the configuration of the environment file is fairly complicated. If we broke that down into configuration of test harness, sort of test harness configurations, then that would be easier to understand and easier to refer to, and we could support multiple of them. The asserts module, that could be made pluggable, so we could do asserts and sort of weight type asserts into things like Kafka. So we don't actually have to do our test only at the end on the API. We could actually have something more invasive. Report test delivery, mocks. Oh, this is a good one. Tying up your mocks to the test cases, which are important, using open tracing standards. I think that's a pretty good idea. Pluggable micro front ends on the UI. So at the moment, when we at Infotex want to build a POC demonstration, we go in and we change the code to give a UI that really reflects the particular use case that we're trying to sell. That's a really powerful mechanism. We just want that to be available to the wider community just through a pluggable mechanism. And then there are more features. I think because of the initial emphasis on testing, and we definitely departed from that, we could do some refactor of the UI, and then decoupling of the UI from the test runner, and this last one's also important. We could have more work on building test data, so sort of bulk test data and random generating them. We could then start using it for more for a different style of testing. which I think is really important. Okay. Maybe I'm at the end of the presentation. I thought there was one slide more. Or was that it? No, I think. Okay. Anyway, let's stop there. Are there? Oh, yes, references. There's a whole host of references. We've used this all over the place. It's the Mojaloop repository is littered with instances of testing toolkit, and so please go out and check them out and contribute if you want. So, are there any questions? Okay, great. I'm done.
Just one question. Do you have any priorities or asks for the workstream in the next PI?
So I was going to try and motivate it to be a work stream, but it sounds like it's gone straight there. So absolutely. What would the priorities be? I think some of the that wish list is actually pretty good, and I would actually just pick the one that is most applicable at the time. So it might be generalization of the states, because that would allow us to move away from being a Mojaloop hub mode, which would make it a generalized solution. So sort of more in the scope of something supporting digital public goods initiatives. So I think that part should be done first.
Any questions? All right, round of applause for Paul and team. Thanks so much.